To them, he was a mistake, a piece of dust on a polished table. They saw an old man in a worn jacket and told him to get up. They saw faded clothes and told him first class wasn't for his kind. What they didn't see was the ghost of the Iadrang Valley in his eyes. They didn't see the steel of a man who had walked out of a jungle that swallows armies. They judged the book by its cover. But they were about to find out that the pages were written in gunpowder and valor. Because the motorcade waiting on the tarmac wasn't there to arrest him. It was there to honor him. And the 4-star general about to board this plane wasn't coming to escort him off. He was coming to salute a legend. If you believe that true honor is earned in silence, not shouted from a podium, then hit that like button and let's tell this story together. Welcome to NX Incredible Stories. The air in the Charles de Gaulle terminal hummed with a nervous, expensive energy. It was the sound of people going places they deemed important. A symphony of rolling suitcases, clipped English, and the soft chime that announced another delay. Amidst it all, Master Sergeant, retired Samuel Sam Foster, sat like a stone in a rushing river. He was a relic, a man carved from a different kind of wood, and he seemed to absorb the noise around him, leaving only silence in his wake. He wore a simple, dark green field jacket, the kind you could buy at a surplus store for $20. It was faded at the elbows, and the collar was soft with age, but it was immaculately clean. His jeans were worn, but not torn, and his boots looked like they had crossed more than just city streets. They had the deep, settled creases of 1,000 miles walked on unforgiving ground. On the floor beside him was a simple canvas duffel bag, with no logo, no brand, nothing to announce its value. In his hands, he held a tattered paperback, its spine broken, its pages yellowed. He wasn't scrolling on a phone or tapping on a laptop. He was just reading, his eyes moving methodically across the page, his posture perfectly still. A young woman, wrestling with a stroller, a wailing toddler, and a runaway suitcase, dropped a stuffed bear. It landed at Sam's feet. Before she could even apologize, he had bent down, a smooth, efficient motion that defied his age, and picked it up. He held it out to the little boy, whose tears stopped instantly. Sam's eyes, a pale, clear blue that seemed to hold the memory of distant skies, met the boy's. He didn't offer a wide, practiced smile. He just gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. A look that said, "I see you. It's all right." The mother, flustered, stammered a thank you. Sam just nodded again and returned to his book, melting back into the background, his act of kindness already forgotten by the world around him. He was invisible, and that seemed to be exactly how he liked it. The boarding call for Flight 212 to Washington, D.C. crackled over the intercom. Sam waited. He didn't rush the gate like the others in the priority line, who clutched their gold and platinum cards like holy relics. He waited until the line thinned, then walked forward, handed over his ticket, and boarded the plane. He found his seat, 2C, in first class, stowed his small duffel in the overhead, and sat down. He didn't fuss with the controls or demand a pre-flight drink. He just pulled his book back out and continued to read, a small island of tranquility. The calm was shattered by the arrival of Mr. Jennings. He wasn't a man, he was an event. Dressed in a suit that cost more than a car, talking loudly into his phone about a hostile takeover, he radiated an aura of aggressive self-importance. Trailing him was Brenda, the senior flight attendant. Her smile was a mask of professional lacquer, but her eyes were tight with stress. Jennings gestured impatiently toward the first-class cabin. "My assistant booked this seat," he boomed. "I don't care what the system says. Fix it. Brenda's job was to fix it. Her gaze swept the cabin, calculating, assessing. She wasn't looking for a solution, she was looking for a target, the path of least resistance. Her eyes passed over the woman with the diamond necklace, the politician reading the Wall Street Journal, and then they landed on Sam. Perfect, her expression said. An old man in a cheap jacket. He was the problem she could solve. She glided down the aisle, her movements practiced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Sir, excuse me, sir." Sam looked up from his book, his finger holding his place. "I'm so sorry to bother you," Brenda began, "but it appears we have a slight seating issue today. We've had to make an adjustment, and we need to ask you to move to a seat in our premium economy cabin. It's quite comfortable, I assure you." Sam didn't speak. He simply reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his ticket folder, and handed it to her. His movements were slow, deliberate. Brenda glanced at it, her eyes barely registering the print before flicking back to his face. The ticket was clearly marked, First Class, Seat 2C. But that wasn't the detail that mattered to her. She saw the military insignia on the accompanying ID card, but it meant nothing. To her, it was just a formality. The reality was the man in front of her. "Yes, I see that," she said, her voice a little tighter now. "But as I said, we've had to make an operational adjustment. The company will, of course, offer you a voucher for your trouble." She handed the ticket back to him, expecting him to now understand the rules of the game. Her smile was fixed, a polite wall that was not meant to be questioned. She was used to people complying. She had the uniform, the authority. She anticipated a sigh, perhaps a grumble, and then his inevitable retreat. But Sam didn't move. A gap opened in her perfectly managed world. He didn't take the ticket. He just held her gaze. The silence stretched, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Brenda's face. This wasn't going according to script. His silence was heavier than any argument. It wasn't defiant. It was absolute. "Sir, I must insist," she said, the sweetness in her voice curdling into a sharp edge. Mr. Jennings, watching from the aisle, let out an impatient sigh. "For heaven's sake, Brenda, just get him out of my seat." Brenda's face flushed. The public challenge to her authority was humiliating. She turned back to Sam, her professionalism gone, replaced by a cold fury. This quiet old man was the source of her problem. She would remove him. Brenda stood over Sam's seat, a general surveying a piece of territory that refused to yield. The other first-class passengers were now fully invested, a silent jury watching the drama unfold. The air was thick with unspoken judgments. Mr. Jennings tapped his foot, a metronome of impatience. This was no longer about a seat. It was about power, and Brenda felt hers slipping away. She tried again, her voice low and firm, the kind used to discipline a child. "Sir, we have a flight to take off. I don't have time for this. Now, if you'll please gather your things." Sam slowly closed his book, the sound of the cover shutting seeming to echo in the tense cabin. He looked up at her, and his clear blue eyes were not angry or intimidated. They were analytical. He was studying her. Then he asked the question that would unravel her world. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet but carrying down the aisle, "there are 12 other people in this cabin. Out of all of them, why did you choose me?" The question was a precision strike. It wasn't an accusation. It was a mirror. It forced her to confront the very prejudice that had driven her actions from the moment she first saw him. She couldn't answer it honestly. She couldn't say, "Because you look old and poor and unimportant." So she fell back on the shield of bureaucracy. "As I explained, It's an operational requirement to do with the balancing of the aircraft, she stammered, the lie sounding hollow even to her own ears. Sam held her gaze for a moment longer, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was a nod of understanding, but not of agreement. It was the nod of a man who had seen this brand of flawed logic before, in rooms far more dangerous than this one. He spoke again, his voice still level, still calm. Balancing, he repeated softly. In my old job, we learned that balancing a team didn't mean pushing aside the quiet ones. It meant seeing the value in every soldier, especially the ones who didn't advertise their strength. It meant understanding that the man who makes the least noise is often the one carrying the heaviest load. As he spoke, the cabin of the 747 momentarily dissolved. For a split second, Sam wasn't there. He was back in the rain-soaked jungles of Vietnam decades ago. He saw the face of a young private, a kid from Ohio everyone called Fumbles because he was clumsy and scared of his own shadow. The other sergeants wanted him on permanent latrine duty, somewhere he couldn't get anyone hurt. They saw a liability. But Sam saw something else. He saw a kid who, despite his fear, never shirked a task. He saw a quiet diligence that the louder, more confident soldiers lacked. One night, during a monsoon, their platoon was pinned down by an NVA machine gun nest. They were out of grenades, their radio was dead, and the men were starting to panic. The strong men were frozen, their bravado washed away by the terror of the moment. Sam turned to Fumbles. I need you to get this ammo box to Sergeant Miller's position. Can you do it, son? Fumbles' eyes were wide with fear, but he looked at Sam, and in his sergeant's calm gaze, he found something to hold on to. He just nodded. He didn't boast. He didn't make a promise. He just took the heavy box and began to crawl. Through thick mud, under a hail of gunfire that tore the leaves around him to shreds, he crawled. It took him 20 minutes that felt like a lifetime, but he made it. That box of ammunition allowed Miller's squad to lay down suppressing fire, giving Sam's team the opening they needed to flank the enemy position and silence it. Fumbles, the quiet liability, had saved them all. Sam's eyes refocused on Brenda. She saw none of the jungle, none of the heroism. She saw only an old man who was refusing to move. That's a very nice story, sir, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But this is not the military. This is my aircraft, and I need you to move. Now. With a sigh of theatrical finality, she gestured to another flight attendant. Tell Captain Davies we have a non-compliant passenger. We may need to have him removed. Mr. Jennings, seeing his victory was near, sauntered over and was finally ushered into his rightful seat, 1A. He settled in, accepting a glass of champagne from Brenda. He raised his glass in a mock toast towards Sam, a smirk playing on his lips. "Thank you for handling that, Brenda," he said, loud enough for Sam to hear. "It's a shame what's happened to air travel. Used to be a touch of class. Now it seems they'll let anyone up front." The tension had reached its peak. The engine whine began to change pitch as the plane prepared for pushback. Sam Foster sat still, his hands resting on his book. He wasn't looking at Brenda or Jennings. He was looking straight ahead, his face a mask of calm resolve. He had faced down enemy fire, endured hardships that would break most men. He could certainly endure this. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, he remembered another lesson. The cramped, dark room of a SEER training simulation. The instructor screaming in his face, trying to break him. Don't fight their anger, the lesson went. Let it be their problem. You just hold your center. Let their rage burn itself out. It was a lesson he was applying now, at 30,000 feet, surrounded by a different kind of enemy. The quiet honor of a veteran is a story that needs to be told more often. If you agree, let us know in the comments if you've ever witnessed a moment where a quiet hero was misjudged. Your stories inspire us all. The flight across the Atlantic was a long, silent war. Mr. Jennings sipped his champagne, occasionally glancing over at Sam with an air of triumphant disdain. Brenda performed her duties with a rigid, cold efficiency, pointedly ignoring Siat 2C. She was punishing the old man with her neglect, the only weapon she had left. To Sam, it was nothing. He had endured far worse than the passive aggression of a flight attendant. He simply read his book, occasionally looking out the window as the blue ocean gave way to the green coastline of America. As the plane began its descent into Washington, D.C., the mood in the cabin shifted. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their imminent arrival at Reagan National Airport. Mr. Jennings began gathering his things, preening for his arrival. He looked out the window, and a wide, self-satisfied grin spread across his face. On the tarmac below, a scene of immense importance was unfolding. A motorcade of black government SUVs and 2 military police vehicles was parked in a precise formation near the jetway. A small, official-looking honor guard stood at attention. "Ah," Jennings announced to Brenda, who was passing by. "My escort has arrived. Some of us have important work to do in this town. The Pentagon doesn't like to be kept waiting." He was practically glowing with self-importance, assuming this impressive display was for him. The plane taxied to the gate, and the engines spooled down into a low whine. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off. But before anyone could stand, the captain's voice came on again, this time with an unusual instruction. "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you please remain in your seats until our special military guest has deplaned. Thank you." A confused murmur went through the cabin. Jennings looked momentarily puzzled, but quickly recovered, assuming it was some arcane protocol related to his own arrival. The jetway connected with a solid thud. The cabin door was opened. Every eye was on the entrance. They expected to see a security agent or a protocol officer. Instead, the figure who stepped into the cabin was a living piece of American history. He was a 4-star general, his uniform immaculate, adorned with a chest full of ribbons that told the story of a lifetime of service. He was General Wallace, a senior official at the Pentagon, a man whose quiet command silenced the entire aircraft just by his presence. Brenda froze, her hand halfway to a coffee pot. Mr. Jennings, who had started to rise, sat back down heavily. The general's eyes, sharp and discerning, swept the cabin. They didn't register the wealthy CEO or the anxious flight attendant. They were searching. He walked down the aisle, his boots making no sound on the plush carpet. He walked past Jennings without a glance. He walked past the woman with the diamond necklace. He stopped, perfectly, at seat 2C. He faced Sam Foster. And then, in the hushed silence of the cabin, General Wallace, one of the most powerful military men in the world, snapped to the most perfect, crisp salute Sam had ever seen. It was a gesture of profound, absolute respect. "Master Sergeant Foster," the general's voice was a low rumble of authority and genuine emotion. "General Wallace, it's been a long time since the Delta, my friend." He held the salute for a beat longer than protocol required. "Sir," he added, the word landing with the force of a thunderclap, "it is my deepest honor to welcome you to Washington." You could have heard a pin drop. The sound of jaws hitting the floor was almost audible. Brenda's face had gone from pink to stark white. The color drained from her as if a plug had been pulled. Mr. Jennings looked like he had been struck by lightning. His mouth hung open, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. The phone that a young passenger had been told to put away was now up, recording everything. The truth had arrived, not in an argument, but in an undeniable act of reverence. Sam looked up at his old friend, and a rare, small smile touched his lips. He gave a slight nod. "Wally, you're looking good," he said softly. "You didn't have to come all this way." The general finally lowered his salute, his expression softening into one of deep affection and gratitude. "Sam, after what you did for my boy in Kandahar last year, there's no place on earth I wouldn't go to shake your hand." Besides, he leaned in, his voice dropping so only Sam and the surrounding seats could hear. "The president sends his personal regards. He wanted to be here himself, but he said to tell you he still talks about the night you pulled him out of that downed Huey over Pleiku. He said he wouldn't be president without you." The final pieces of the puzzle slammed into place. This quiet old man wasn't just a decorated soldier. He was a kingmaker, a hero whose actions had shaped the lives of the most powerful men in the nation. He was a living legend, hiding in plain sight. The narrator's voice, full of warmth and respect, would close the story. Honor isn't something you wear like a suit. Courage isn't a loud announcement. It's a quiet promise kept in the dark, a debt paid in silence. In a world screaming for attention, we have forgotten how to see the giants who walk quietly among us. They are not on magazine covers. They are not trending on social media. They are the mechanic down the street with grease on his hands and the memory of Fallujah in his eyes. They are the mailman who walks your route every day, the same way he once walked patrol in the mountains of Korea. They are the grandfather at the end of the table, his hands trembling slightly, not from age, but from the weight of the lives he carried home. They are our quiet heroes. They are our living history. They are the foundation of this nation. They don't ask for a throne or a first-class seat. They have already paid a price far greater than any ticket. All they ask for is the dignity we owe them. So the next time you see him, that quiet veteran in the corner of the diner, the old soldier at the VFW post, the neighbor who raises the flag every morning, don't just walk by. Stop. Look him in the eye, shake his hand, and say, "Thank you," because you may not be looking at an ordinary man. You may be looking at American royalty, a man who has earned his place not with wealth, but with a sacrifice you can never repay. As they deplaned, General Wallace put a hand on Sam's shoulder, and they walked out together, two old soldiers, brothers in a way that no civilian could ever understand. Mr. Jennings was left in his seat, small and insignificant, the champagne on his tray table having lost all its fizz. Brenda stood frozen in the galley, her world tilted on its axis. The lesson had been delivered, not with anger, but with honor. If this story of quiet heroism moved you, share it with someone you think needs to see it. Our veterans deserve to have their stories told and their honor recognized. Thank you for joining us on NX Incredible Stories, where the greatest tales are the ones that are true.